The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. Three boys from Sengkang Green Primary School were suspended after being found to have bullied a female classmate. One of them was even caned after sending violent death threats to her mother over the phone. The girl was so distressed by the incident that she stopped attending school for a period of time. Now, she has since returned under a safety plan put in place by the school, while her parents have withdrawn their request for a transfer. The Ministry of Education has shared that the school acted each time reports were made, suspending the boys, engaging their parents, and introducing new measures such as peer support and bag checks. But the case has also stirred public debate about whether schools are doing enough, whether punishments like suspension and caning truly address the problem, and about the role of parents when they feel institutions are not acting quickly enough. So to help us understand the psychology behind cases like this and to explore what more can be done to prevent and address bullying in schools, joining us today is Jean Tan, clinical psychologist at Clinical Psychology Associates. Hi, Jean. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Ben. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad.
All right. Well, let's dive into this, Jean. Three boys were suspended for bullying a female classmate here. I mean, one of them was even caned after sending violent death threats to her mother. When you hear about children this young making such extreme threats, what goes through your mind as a psychologist?
I suppose everyone is alarmed by the act, right? Because it's seemingly bold for a 9-year-old child. Such acts typically would signal underlying distress, right? Or exposure to some inappropriate influences, which a lot of us might be thinking. And it's often a reminder that bullying, especially when it escalates to threats, it isn't just about the act itself, but we have to look at the broader issues at hand, whether the child has difficulty with emotional regulation, friendship difficulties, or external influences. Yeah, so it really tells us that we have to address these issues as early as possible and address the root causes, ensuring that all the children involved actually need to get the necessary support to grow positively.
Right. Well, at 9 years old, though, do children even fully grasp the seriousness of their own words and actions?
At 9, children are still developing their understanding of consequences and empathy, right? So if we look at the brain, their prefrontal cortex, which governs impulse control and long-term thinking, isn't fully matured. So while they understand that words can hurt, they may not, or often they don't fully grasp the impact of their extreme actions, right? This doesn't excuse the behavior, but it definitely highlights the need to guide, educate, rather than just solely relying on punitive measures. So teaching them to connect actions to consequences in a safe and supportive environment is especially important at this point.
But how does a situation like this escalate from, name-calling in class to something as serious as violent threats?
Escalation often happens when initial behaviors like name-calling go unaddressed or are normalized in a child's environment. So children are born to test boundaries. And if they see no consequences or feel emboldened by their peers, right, their actions can easily intensify. So emotional triggers such as them feeling powerless, angry, or insecure can push the child towards more extreme expressions, especially if they lack healthy coping mechanisms.
Right. But I think when I was younger and, one of the mechanisms or people that have taught me was that if someone name calls me and constantly bullies me, is just to ignore them and they would just get bored of it. So is this now not the case? Should you not ignore them and stand up for yourself? What should the person or the victim do at this scenario?
I'll give you a personal anecdote, right? So my daughter was name called when she was in primary 2 for cutting her hair. So her friend just kept calling her repeatedly over days. So she came back and told us about it. So we said, do you want to tell her that it hurts, right? It's not nice.
Right.
And she said, yeah, I'll try. So she went to school, but she still couldn't. So at such a point, oftentimes that's when parents have to ask ourselves, is this name calling so making her very nervous, she feels disempowered, or is it that she doesn't have the skill? So what we actually proceeded to do was to role play with her, right? Okay. Let's say I just kept calling her the same thing. So you kind of let the anxiety in the body settle. So she feels like, oh, I now know what to do. So it might be a skill. So in addressing that bully is important. So earlier on, like I mentioned, right, some people don't know that you calling me out of fun actually hurts me. So when we actually address it directly with the person name calling, the person learns, oh, actually, I've hurt you. I'm sorry about that. Right? It's a good way to help our kids, right, learn how to be more confident in dealing with name calling, as well as for the other party to learn consequences about their actions.
Well, then, where do you think children who bully, pick up these kinds of behaviors? Could it be from family dynamics, peer influence, or even media exposure?
Children are highly impressionable, right? So their behaviors are shaped from multiple influences. Peer influence, for example, can be very powerful. So, for instance, if I witness older kids at the playground threatening each other, and then children may adopt these behaviors because I'm at that age. I don't know what is, and I think that might look cool. So I might actually start adopting these behaviors to fit in or gain status, right? Of course, we have family dynamics. If a child witnesses or experiences aggression at home, they may mimic those patterns. Not forgetting media is a big influence on the children and young people these days. And oftentimes they may be exposed to harmful language which have been normalized if it's not balanced with guidance. So it's rarely one factor alone, but a combination of elements. So if they don't have positive role models or skills to manage their emotions, it can lead to such behaviors.
Jean, the Ministry of Education said the girl herself had engaged in hurtful behavior. Does this suggest that bullying is often a two-way street, or could this have been her way of trying to fight back or defend herself in a harmful situation?
Well, bullying situations are often complex, right? It's not uncommon for victims to respond in ways that can seem like bullying themselves. It can be seen as a way of them protecting, it can be seen as a way of her protecting herself, right? So a child under stress may lash out, may use hurtful language as a form of control or to retaliate. But it doesn't mean that bullying is always a two-way street. It highlights how the cycles of hurt can escalate without intervention. So I just want to highlight the evidence of the girl actually writing in the spelling book as a way of asking for help. It actually shows that she was in distress and was lacking a constructive way to cope. Although intelligent enough to say that, hey, if I write in the spelling book, that may be one way of me communicating with my teacher to let her know that I'm in distress. Therefore, I think it's crucial to address these harmful behaviors in a very timely manner while understanding the context and the intent behind them to break the cycle.
Well, MOE has also shared that bullying cases have held steady about 2 incidents per 1,000 primary students and 6 in secondary schools each year. Is this still a concerning number in your view, even if it hasn't risen?
Well, stability in numbers is encouraging, but I also suspect that a good number of bullying cases may not be reported, right? But any level of bullying is concerning because one incident can have lasting emotional impacts on the child. Right? So 2 incidents per 1,000 primary school kids, that would translate to hundreds of cases annually. Therefore, each affecting not just the child, but the extended network, right? Their parents, their peers, the school communities. And the focus shouldn't be just on the numbers, but perhaps on the severity and the impact and whether the school is actually equipped to prevent and address these incidents effectively.
Right.
And these consistent numbers actually does suggest that there's still a lot of work to be done to reduce bullying proactively.
Well, seeing the cases that have been reported, are cases today becoming more extreme than in the past? For example, are we seeing more physical bullying, more verbal abuse, or perhaps new forms of online and digital bullying?
I suppose there is evidence that bullying has evolved with technology. Nowadays we see a lot of filming of kids getting hurt. And another big part would be cyberbullying because that is definitely becoming more prevalent alongside traditional forms of verbal or physical abuse, right? So online platforms amplify the reach and the anonymity of harmful behaviors, therefore making it feel more extreme to victims. While physical bullying it still remains a concern, but verbal and digital forms are increasingly common. So children have access to devices and social media at younger ages. So the nature of bullying may not be more extreme in intent, but the impact can feel amplified due to the public and the permanent nature of online actions. Okay. So therefore, I think schools really need to be very much on their feet, right, to adapt to these shifting dynamics.
Well, then in this case, the school suspended the boys, caned one of them, and put in place a safety plan for the girl. MOE said it tried to balance discipline with helping the children learn and grow here. So do punishments like suspension and caning actually deter bullying, or do they risk creating more resentment?
Well, punishment like suspension and caning may deter some behaviors by setting clear boundaries, but the consequence meted out, right, always needs to be should also be considered from the recipient's perspective, whether it's effective, because if the child can breed resentment, right, if the child feels shamed or alienated, or sometimes not understanding why the actions were wrong. So at this age, actually, children respond better to interventions that combine accountability with education. So where they make restorative practices, where they reflect on the harm caused and make amends. Therefore, punitive measures alone may not address the root causes, such as emotional struggles or peer dynamics. Because if we don't address it carefully, it may escalate to defiance without the support to help them change and grow.
Okay. Beyond such punishments then, what other approaches should be considered to help children genuinely learn from these incidents?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier about the restorative approaches, right? Actually, that is a key. We have to bring the children together to discuss the impact of their action, to help them learn to foster empathy and accountability. Therefore, the school counselor plays an important role here, right? So she can see both the victim and the perpetrators and address the underlying issues of their anger or their lack of safety. So schools can actually also have social emotional learning programs where they teach them how to resolve conflict and manage emotions early on. I think it's something which the MOE is actively doing. But I also think that role-playing is a big part to help kids build these skills. I can have head knowledge, right? I know what is the right thing to do, but I do not have the skills to do it. So it's very different. Then, of course, parents play a big role here as well to reinforce these positive behaviors at home. So they need to keep practicing, and they also need to understand why, for the child who was bullied, right, you need to understand why they acted out, whether it was due to peer pressure or personal struggles. And that's when we have tailored interventions from the school counselor that can promote genuine growth.
The girl's mother posted about the case on Facebook, including audio of the threats, and her actions have sparked outrage, but also led to doxing of teachers and pupils. Is there any psychological impact on a child when their case is so made so public online? And if parents feel schools aren't acting fast enough, what are healthier ways to raise concerns without causing more harm?
Well, I think public exposure always leads to scrutiny, isn't it, for both the victims as well as the perpetrators. It can amplify shame, anger. It also invades into their privacy. And for the perpetrators, a thing to consider is whether they will be stigmatized in school, which may actually hinder their rehabilitation process. So I think that frustrated parents can actually, I think in the mother's case, she did try to escalate through formal channels, right? So she did what is necessary. But I think maybe really just being very persistent with contacting the school leaders, contacting MOE directly, engaging the school counselor to mediate that situation is important. But I also think that from a school as well as the parent front, the regular follow-up. So you follow up every day and ask, how are things? If things for one day is better, then you can space it out 2 days later. We can even talk about giving the girls signals, right? Like, tell me if you're in distress. If she doesn't feel safe being seen talking to the teacher, she can also have a secret signal with the teacher, just as a way to signal to the teacher that, hey, look, this is still problematic. I still need your help. So it's not just about parents, but I think that if the school and the child, right, let's say the teacher and the child can have a good rapport, they can actually have these signals to actually help and be timely and effective in their interventions.
Okay. Well, overall then, Jean, do you think our current anti-bullying frameworks in schools are strong enough, or are there still gaps? What more could be done system-wide to reduce bullying?
Well, I think Singapore schools have made a lot of stride with anti-bullying policies. They have safety plans, they have counseling, but as we can see, gaps still remain. So proactive prevention through consistent social emotional learning and fostering an inclusive school cultures needs more emphasis, right? Training teachers to spot early signs of bullying, whether it's subtle or digital forms, is also important. System-wide, I think we could integrate more parent education programs to align home and school values. Right, peer support systems like buddy programs can also be quite timely to provide intervention.
Right. And finally, Jean, if a child feels they're being bullied, what's the first step they should take?
First step is to tell a trusted adult, whether it's a parent, a teacher, or a school counselor, right? Children often fear retaliation or not being believed. Therefore, I think the reassuring them that speaking up is safe and brave, right? So what we should do as adults is to try and have them describe specific incidents calmly, as this helps adults act effectively. If they are hesitant, the kids can write down or confide in a friend who can support them in reporting is also a good start. So early reporting prevents escalation and ensures that they receive the help that they need.
Right. Some great information from you there. Thank you so much, Jean, for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That was Jean Tan, clinical psychologist at Clinical Psychology Associates. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.